The fall is almost over, but this is the time when you can get started with your kids. You can begin the process of talking about trout anatomy and biology and habitat. Some schools take field trips, go to the hatchery, etc. You can train your kids in water testing procedures and data recording procedures. But we're heading into now peak period, because if you haven't already, you need to figure out where you're going to put your tank. And I'm not going to discuss that, but it needs to be a place capable of holding Ian and I and Tom all at once. You need to be able to support 600 pounds, basically. And sometimes you have a perfect piece of furniture for that. Sometimes you've got a great counter where the cupboards above it are a ways away. They've got to be at least 2 feet above the surface of the cupboard to give room for the tank, which is 21 inches tall. But worst case, you can just build a few stacks of cinder blocks and put a piece of plywood across it. Several schools do that.
That's nice and low.
Yes.
I like that idea.
Yeah, especially if your kids are young. That gives them an eye-level view. The tanks will need to be set up in the next 2 weeks, really. And this year we are strongly recommending what we call a pre-cycling procedure. And Rob will walk us through that later. Then typically in the first week of January, this week it's the week of January 7th, you will get your eggs. Generally speaking, your regional volunteers will work out a process for that. They will communicate with you via email, tell you when they're able to do this. For some of us, it's a complicated process, like we will deliver eggs to 29 Southwest Vermont schools on the same day. So we need a team of like 6 people. And it's kind of like a, beat the clock procedure. I'll meet you in the parking lot by Dunkin' Donuts, and I'm going to meet you in the high school parking lot and give you the 6 that you're going to take on. But the early stage of the process is not too exciting. The eggs are fun to look at. You can get kids to draw them. You can expose them to a microscope briefly, but they are very sensitive to light, so you don't want to do that for too long. And then they'll start hatching. And the most important thing will be to remove the shells, because the shells can produce fungus, and that's not good. You're starting to do water testing from before the eggs arrive, but you're certainly continuing it through this period. There's a bacterial product that's part of your kit. That's one of the fun learning opportunities of this course. I ask kids, tell me about bacteria. Bad. No, some of it is really good. We use good bacteria. And in March, typically, or late February, depending on how warm your tank is, you will reach what's called the swim-up stage. And we will have a separate little talk this afternoon about that. That's a critical window of several days when the fish need to learn to feed, to consume food in their environment, because up to that point they've been absorbing this nutritional yolk sac. It's very important to be around when that happens, because you will see some very tentative signs of behavior simulating swimming up into the water column a little bit, and that's when you need to start feeding them. In late March and April, the fish will be feeding, growing. Water chemistry may start to change for you, although the pre-cycling process should reduce that dramatically. And this is a time when kids can start seeing the morphological and behavioral changes in the fish. One of the culmination of the year for Trout in the Classroom is a release day, and it's important to devote some energy to planning that, and we'll have a conversation this afternoon about what goes into a release day and what the options are. But finally, you will hold your release day typically in the second half of May or the first week of June. And then you come back from that to an empty classroom, or a classroom devoid of fish life. And it's a little sad.
It's very
but you can put the kids to work cleaning up the equipment and packing it away. So, the real activity, however, is all the teaching and the learning. And the beauty of Trout in the Classroom, from my point of view, is that if you're fortunate enough to be teaching at the right level, and from my point of view, 3rd through 6th grade is kind of the sweet spot for this program. And if you're in one of those teaching situations where either you teach all the subjects, or you have a partner who teaches half of them and you teach the other half, and you work with that partner, you can make this an across the curriculum program. You can have the kids, make art, write poetry, build models. Of course, they can graph numbers. They can, investigate scientific hypotheses. They can research the social history of fishing. How many trout can you kill a day in Vermont? Anybody know? If you know, if you're a fisherman and you know that, take a guess.
3 or 5?
3 or 5 sounds good, right?
Your daily limit.
12. It's 12. And if you go down to Orvis, you'll see these photographs of people holding 50 or 60 fish from a day's outing. Our attitudes have...
It's actually 12 brook trout.
It's 12 brook trout. Yes, and most of us think that being the only native trout species should be protected more than the rainbows and the browns, which are invasives. But you think 3 or 4, I would think 3 or 4 is reasonable, but our values don't reflect the values of the 1920s and the 1850s, and that's a social studies research project for a kid if you want to extend it into that area. The presentation is on the Google Docs, in a Google Docs folder on the Vermont Trout in the Classroom website, which we'll talk about towards the end of the day. We couldn't do this program without a very strong partnership with the Vermont Department of Fish and Wildlife. And they have been immensely supportive of our work and very proud with us of the impact it's beginning to have on thousands of kids every year in our state. So representing the department and talking to us a bit about the eggs is Jeremy Whalen, who is the supervisor of the Roxbury Fish Culture Station.